In a cave beneath Midgard, a god screams, not from battle wounds or the clash of steel, but from poison that burns through divine flesh like molten iron. This is Loki, shapeshifter, silver-tongued deceiver, the god who once saved Asgard from giants and demons. The same hands that built the walls of the god's realm now strain against bonds that will never break. Above his face, a serpent's fangs drip venom with the rhythm of a heartbeat, each drop an eternity of agony. This is not the death of a villain. This is the torture of a brother, ordered by the very gods he bled to protect. How did the savior of Asgard become its greatest enemy? How did divine justice become divine cruelty? The answer lies not in what Loki did, but in what the gods chose to become. To understand Loki's torment, we must first speak of light itself. Balder the Beautiful, beloved of all the 9 realms. Son of Odin, brother to Thor, Balder shone with an inner radiance that made flowers bloom in winter and wolves lie down with sheep. His very presence brought peace to Asgard's endless councils of war. The gods loved him not from duty, but from helplessness. To look upon Balder was to love, as surely as to touch flame was to burn. Even the stones wept when he passed, and the trees bent their branches in reverence. His mother Frigg had traveled to every corner of existence, extracting oaths from fire and water, from iron and earth, that none would harm her golden son. All swore willingly. What force in the 9 realms would wish to dim such perfect light? Even gods cannot escape the threads of fate. Balder began to dream, not of golden meadows or feasting halls, but of darkness closing around him like water. Night after night, he saw his own death approaching, felt the cold touch of hell's realm creeping into his bones. The dreams grew stronger, more vivid, until he woke gasping with the taste of grave earth in his mouth. When he told the Aesir of his visions, a chill settled over Asgard that no fire could warm. For gods might lie, mortals might deceive themselves, but dreams spoke with the voice of fate itself. Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, returned from their daily flights with disturbing news. The Norns, the 3 sisters who weave destiny, would speak no comfort about Balder's future. Something dark was coming to the realm of light. Frigg's desperate journey to extract oaths from all of creation seemed to have worked. When the gods tested Balder's invulnerability, spears shattered against his skin, stones turned to flower petals at his touch, and arrows curved away from their target as if repelled by his very presence. What began as testing became sport, and what began as sport became celebration. The gods delighted in hurling their deadliest weapons at their beloved Balder, laughing as each attack proved harmless. The sight of the beautiful god, standing serene amid a storm of blades, became the most joyous entertainment in Asgard. Even Thor's mighty hammer Mjolnir could not mark his divine flesh. But Loki watched these games with growing unease. His shapeshifter's instincts sensed a flaw in the pattern, a loose thread in fate's weaving. Frigg had been thorough, but thorough was not perfect. Loki's curiosity had always been his defining trait and his greatest weakness. Disguised as an old woman, he visited Frigg in her spinning hall, weaving casual conversation like a spider weaves silk. Had everything truly sworn to protect her son? Oh yes, the goddess replied with pride. Everything that mattered, fire and water, iron and stone, every beast and bird and tree. Everything except one tiny shoot growing west of Valhalla, a young mistletoe branch too small and innocent to bother with. Loki's blood turned to ice water. In the complex web of Norse magic, size meant nothing. Power could hide in the smallest places, and fate delighted in turning the insignificant into the decisive. That night, while Asgard slept, Loki crept to that western grove. By moonlight, he cut the mistletoe branch with his own hands, feeling its strange weight, light as feather down, yet heavy as destiny itself. The next day found the gods at their usual sport, hurling weapons at laughing Balder. But Loki's attention focused on one figure standing apart, Hertha, Balder's blind brother, unable to participate in the joyous game that delighted all others. Here was loneliness that could be weaponized, exclusion that could be turned to purpose. Loki approached with honeyed words and helpful hands. Why should Hertha alone be denied the pleasure of honoring his brother? Here, take this small branch, mistletoe, harmless as a flower stem. Let Loki guide his aim, and Hertha too could join in celebrating Balder's divine protection. The blind god's face lit with grateful joy. He had no way of seeing the deadly concentration in Loki's eyes, the careful calculation as the trickster positioned the innocent branch. What felt like inclusion was actually manipulation. What seemed like help was murder wearing friendship's mask. The mistletoe branch flew straight and true, guided by Loki's steady hand and Hertha's unknowing strength. It struck Balder in the chest, not with the harmless bounce they all expected, but with the sickening finality of fate fulfilled. The most beautiful of all gods crumpled to the floor of Asgard like a cut flower, his inner light flickering and dying as divine blood pooled beneath him. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound, but the presence of horror too vast for voices. Then Frigg's scream shattered the air, a mother's anguish that shook the roots of Yggdrasil itself. The gods stood frozen, unable to process what their eyes showed them. Balder the beloved, Balder the beautiful, Balder the invulnerable, dead by a child's toy, a harmless plant, the one thing in all creation deemed too insignificant to matter. And in that silence, Loki smiled. The god's grief lasted only moments before it crystallized into rage. They knew, without investigation or trial, they knew who had engineered this perfect murder. Loki's smile had given him away, that flash of satisfaction at chaos successfully sown. But when they turned to seize him, the trickster was already gone, his shape-shifting powers carrying him away from Asgard in the form of a salmon, silver-bright and swift as thought itself. The hunt that followed shook the 9 realms. Odin's ravens scoured every river and stream. Thor's hammer struck the earth so hard that mountains cracked. Tyr led packs of wolves through every forest, while Frigg's tears became tracking storms that flooded valleys in their search for her son's killer. But Loki knew every secret path between the worlds, every hidden current and concealed cave. For days he evaded them, a gleaming fish dancing just beyond their nets, until finally Thor's intelligence matched his own cunning. When they finally dragged Loki back to Asgard in chains, the gods' faces showed a coldness that would have frozen mortal blood. This was no longer about justice. This was about satisfying a grief too deep for words and a rage too pure for mercy. They bound him with chains forged from the entrails of his own son Nafi, killed before his eyes as additional punishment. The bonds burned against his flesh with the fire of kinship betrayed, growing tighter with every struggle. Above his face, they positioned a serpent whose fangs dripped poison without end, each drop designed to cause maximum agony without granting the mercy of death. Only his faithful wife Sigyn remained, holding a bowl to catch the venom, her love the single point of light in an eternity of darkness. But even she must occasionally empty the bowl, and in those moments the poison falls free, causing convulsions so violent they shake the earth itself, what mortals call earthquakes. But the gods' revenge came with a price they could not foresee. In binding Loki, they bound themselves to fate's darkest thread. The trickster's torment is not eternal. It lasts until Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, when he will break free to lead the forces of chaos against those who tortured him. Every drop of venom that burns his flesh, every moment of agony stretched into forever, feeds the rage that will one day consume Asgard itself. The gods thought they were punishing a murderer. Instead, they were creating their own destroyer, tempering their nemesis in the fires of divine cruelty. Odin, who once called Loki blood brother, sealed their mutual destruction with chains of vengeance. The Aesir chose justice over mercy, punishment over redemption, and in doing so, they chose their own ending. For in the Norse cosmos, all debts come due, all wounds demand payment, and even gods cannot escape the consequences of their choices. Today, when the earth trembles beneath our feet, the old stories say it is Loki writhing in his bonds, the poison momentarily touching his face as Sigyn empties her bowl. His punishment echoes through time itself, a reminder that even divine justice can become indistinguishable from divine cruelty. The gods saved Asgard from one death, Baldur's, only to guarantee their own destruction at Ragnarök. In seeking perfect justice, they created perfect injustice. In binding chaos, they ensured chaos would ultimately triumph. The tale of Loki's eternal punishment asks the question that haunts every mythology. When does justice become vengeance, and when does vengeance become the seed of its own undoing? The answer lies buried in a cave beneath the world, where a god screams in darkness and his faithful wife holds a bowl with trembling hands. But there are other bonds in Norse mythology, other chains that bind gods and monsters alike, and the next tale reveals how even the strongest fetters can be forged from the most impossible things.
In the golden halls of Asgard, Odin the Allfather sat upon his high throne, Lidskjalf, his ravens Hugin and Munin perched beside him. Through his single eye he gazed across the 9 realms, seeing all that was and much that would come to pass. The weight of knowledge pressed upon him like a mountain, for he knew of Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods, and felt the insufficiency of his current wisdom to prevent it. His ravens whispered to him of the runes, those mystical symbols that held the deepest secrets of creation and destruction. They spoke of power beyond even his divine understanding, of wisdom that could reshape fate itself. But such knowledge, they warned with their black eyes gleaming, came at a price that even the gods might hesitate to pay. Beyond the shimmering rainbow bridge of Bifrost stood Yggdrasil, the mighty world tree whose branches supported all of creation. Its trunk rose impossibly high, disappearing into the clouds and stars themselves, while its roots delved deep into the wells of wisdom and fate. The great ash tree hummed with ancient power, its leaves rustling with the voices of destiny. Odin approached the colossal tree with slow, measured steps. At its base, the Norns, the 3 sisters of fate, wove the threads of all existence. They looked up at him with knowing eyes, but spoke not a word, for they understood why he had come. The tree itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if it too knew that this moment would echo through all the ages. The voice of Yggdrasil resonated not in his ears but in his very soul, speaking truths that mortal tongues could never utter. The runes it revealed were not merely symbols to be learned, but pieces of cosmic law that must be earned through absolute sacrifice. To gain their power, one must give up everything: comfort, safety, even the certainty of survival. Odin understood with crystalline clarity what was required of him. He must offer himself to himself, become both sacrificer and sacrifice, abandoning all the privileges of his divine station. For 9 days and 9 nights, he would surrender to the tree's ancient power, taking neither food nor drink, embracing the threshold between life and death where true wisdom dwelled. With solemn purpose, Odin took the sacred cord and bound himself to the great tree's trunk. The rope was woven from the hair of goddesses and the breath of fish, strong enough to hold even the father of the gods. As he secured himself to Yggdrasil's ancient bark, he felt the tree's timeless strength flowing into him, connecting him to the very foundations of existence. The wind began to howl through the branches above, carrying with it the voices of spirits and the echoes of unborn prophecies. Odin closed his single eye and surrendered himself to the ordeal that awaited. In this moment of binding, he became neither fully god nor mortal, but something between, a seeker suspended between all certainties. The first days passed like centuries as hunger gnawed at Odin's divine form. His ravens circled overhead, calling to him with worried cries, but he could not answer. The wind stripped moisture from his lips, and the sun blazed mercilessly while the cold of night bit deep into his bones. Yet still he remained bound, his will unbroken, his purpose unwavering. Below him, the roots of Yggdrasil pulsed with the rhythm of cosmic heartbeats. He could feel the tree drawing him deeper into its mysteries, each moment of suffering opening new channels of perception. The physical pain became a doorway, and through it he began to glimpse the hidden patterns that governed all things. As the nights grew longer and his strength ebbed like a retreating tide, Odin's consciousness began to expand beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. In his mind's eye, he saw the births of stars and the deaths of worlds, witnessed the first spark of creation and the final silence that would follow Ragnarok. The visions came in waves, each one revealing deeper layers of cosmic truth. Through the darkness, he perceived the well of Erd beneath the tree's roots, where the Norns drew water to nourish Yggdrasil each day. He saw Mimir's well of wisdom, where he had once traded his eye for a single drink. Now he understood that all these sacrifices were but steps on a greater path, preparing him for this ultimate moment of surrender. On the seventh day, Odin felt himself slipping toward the shadowy realm of Hel, his own daughter's domain of the dead. His divine essence flickered like a candle in the wind, and for moments at a time, he existed more in death than in life. Yet in this liminal state, suspended between existence and void, he found a clarity that surpassed even his previous wisdom. The boundary between self and cosmos began to dissolve. He was the tree, he was the wind, he was the very fabric of reality itself. In this state of near dissolution, he sensed something vast approaching, a presence that existed beyond gods and mortals, beyond life and death. The runes themselves were stirring, preparing to reveal their secrets to one who had proven worthy through ultimate sacrifice. As the ninth night reached its darkest hour, when death seemed poised to claim even the All-Father, a great silence fell across all the 9 realms. In that perfect stillness, Odin heard something that no being had ever heard before, the true names of the runes themselves, spoken by the voice of creation. Each name resonated through his being like thunder, carrying with it the power to shape reality itself. 24 runes revealed themselves to him, not as mere symbols but as living forces of cosmic law. He saw how they could be combined to work magic, to heal or to harm, to reveal hidden truths or to bind fate itself. The knowledge flooded into him like a torrent, filling the void left by his sacrificed mortality with divine understanding beyond anything he had possessed before. With strength born of newfound wisdom, Odin began to chant the first rune song ever spoken. His voice, though weakened by 9 days of ordeal, carried a power that made the very foundations of Yggdrasil tremble. Each word he spoke was a rune, each rune a key to unlock the mysteries of existence. The song spiraled upward through the branches and downward through the roots, touching every realm of creation. As he sang, the rope that bound him began to loosen, not through any physical force but through the power of the runes themselves. He had become something new. No longer just Odin the God King, but Odin the Rune Master, bearer of the deepest secrets of the cosmos. The sacrifice was complete, and the transformation had begun. As dawn broke on the 10th day, Odin freed himself from the world tree with movements that seemed to bend reality around him. He was transformed. His remaining eye now blazed with the fire of runic wisdom, and his very presence hummed with newfound power. The ordeal had burned away his mortal limitations, leaving him reborn as something greater than he had ever been before. Yggdrasil's branches rustled in what seemed like applause, and even the Norns paused in their weaving to acknowledge his achievement. The tree had accepted his sacrifice and found it worthy. In return, it had granted him not just knowledge, but the power to use that knowledge to shape the fate of gods and mortals alike. Odin did not keep the rune's power for himself alone. As he walked back toward Asgard, he began to share fragments of runic wisdom with worthy mortals and gods alike, teaching them to carve the sacred symbols into wood and stone. Through his sacrifice, the gift of written language and magical knowledge spread throughout all the 9 realms, transforming civilization itself. Yet the greatest runes, those that could alter the very fabric of fate, these he guarded carefully, knowing that such power must be earned through sacrifice and wisdom. The path to the deepest mysteries would always require something of the seeker, just as it had required everything of him at the foot of the world tree. From that day forward, Yggdrasil bore the marks of Odin's sacrifice, its bark scarred where he had bound himself in his quest for wisdom. The world tree became forever after a symbol of the price of knowledge and the power of willing sacrifice. Seekers would come to it in later ages, hoping to glimpse even a fraction of what the All-Father had gained through his ordeal. The runes themselves spread throughout the worlds, carved into weapons and worn as talismans, written in great books and whispered in sacred rituals. But always, those who used them remembered that they were born from the greatest sacrifice in the history of the gods, when Odin gave himself to himself at the foot of the world tree, and in return gained the power to read and write the very language of creation.
Thor caught something in the ocean that nearly killed him. A wound on Mjolnir, his invincible hammer, proves it. Most versions of this story end with the fishing line cut, the serpent sinking back into darkness, Thor returning empty-handed. But the Norse knew better. They knew that Jörmungandr, the world serpent, didn't just escape that day. It learned, it waited, and according to prophecy, when Thor finally faces it again at the end of all things, both god and monster will die by each other's hand. This isn't a victory story. It's a countdown to mutual annihilation. So why did Thor keep fishing for something designed to destroy him? Odin sits in the high seat of Asgard, his single eye fixed on Thor. The All-Father speaks of a day when the gods learned a terrible truth. A Völva, a seer, spoke prophecy that would shape everything that followed. 3 children were born to Loki and the giantess Angerboda. Fenrir the wolf held the corpse queen, and Jörmungandr the world serpent. Each one carried a thread of doom. Each one was fated to rise and devour the gods at Ragnarök. The gods could not kill them. Prophecy cannot be unmade, but they could contain them. Jörmungandr was cast into the ocean that circles Midgard, the world of humans. The serpent sank into the abyss and grew. It grew so vast that it wrapped around the entire world, its tail gripped between its own teeth. For ages it lay in darkness, patient and hungry, until now. The scout races into Asgard, breathless and drenched in seawater. The messenger brings word that the ocean is no longer still. Fishing vessels vanish without trace. The waves rise and fall in rhythms that match no storm. Whirlpools open in the deep where none existed before. The fishermen of Midgard speak of something waking, something vast, something angry. Odin and Thor exchange a look. Only one being alive has ever hooked Jörmungandr and lived to tell it. Only one god has the strength and the will to venture into those waters again. Thor grips Mjolnir, and he knows he alone must go back to the abyss. The serpent is stirring. It remembers his touch. It remembers his rage. And it remembers that it survived. Thor travels to the edge of the world, where the giant Hymir dwells in a hall of stone and ice. Hymir is ancient beyond reckoning. He is one of the few beings who has witnessed the full span of the cosmos. He has stood in the presence of the world Serpent and lived. When Thor arrives, Hymir does not look surprised. The giant has been expecting him. They sit by a fire that burns with flames older than mountains, and Hymir speaks. He tells Thor what he has never told another living soul: the story of the last time they fished together, the last time they tried to kill Jörmungandr, the last time they failed. Hymir's voice is steady, but his eyes hold the weight of ages. He recalls standing in a boat with Thor beside him. They rode into waters so deep that light itself seemed to drown. The giant explains how they prepared for that hunt. They needed bait worthy of a creature that could swallow worlds. They slaughtered an ox and used its head, lashed to a chain forged from an impossible material, the tears shed by mourning mothers. That chain was the only thing strong enough not to snap under the serpent's weight. That chain was the only rope in all the 9 worlds that would not fail. They cast it into the darkness, and the serpent took it. Thor and Hymir stand at the shore, preparing to row into the abyss once more. They are older now. The weight of ages presses on them both, but Thor's resolve burns hotter than any forge. They select a new ox, the largest they can find, and strike it down. Its blood steams in the cold air. They gather the carcass and load it into a small boat, low and narrow, built for deep water. Hymir produces a chain, not the same one, but one that carries the memory of sorrow in every link. It is wrapped carefully, coiled like a serpent itself. Thor checks it. His hand runs along every inch. He nods. This will do. As they push the boat toward the water, Hymir mutters a prayer to gods who may or may not be listening. Thor says nothing. He has already made his choice. They row farther than the land dares follow. The sky above grows pale and strange. The water beneath them turns from blue to black, to a color that has no name. The air grows cold in a way that cold should not exist. Hymir rows in silence. Thor stands at the bow, Mjolnir resting across his shoulders. The water becomes still, too still. No fish jump, no birds cry. The ocean itself seems to hold its breath. Then Thor leans over the side and casts the line. The ox head sinks, down, down into the abyss. Nothing happens for a long moment, and then the chain goes taut. The boat lurches. Something far below has smelled the bait. Something vast is rising toward them from the dark. The serpent takes the bait with a strike so violent that the boat nearly capsizes. The chain hums with tension. Hymir grabs the sides to keep from falling into the water. Thor braces his feet against the bow and begins to pull. Hand over hand, he draws the line up. The serpent thrashes. The ocean convulses around them. Waves rise higher and higher, towering like mountains, threatening to swallow everything. The water surges onto the shore of Midgard. Fishermen flee. Fields flood. The world shakes. But Thor does not let go. His muscles burn. His hands grip the chain. And then the serpent's head breaks the surface. Jörmungandr emerges. Its eyes are like burning coals. Its mouth is wide enough to swallow the sky. Venom drips from its fangs. Thor raises Mjolnir, ready to strike the killing blow. This is the moment. This is when it ends. The world serpent's jaws open wide. It lunges toward the boat. Venom sprays across the water, and where it falls, the ocean itself seems to burn. Thor pulls Mjolnir back. He will have one strike, one perfect strike to the creature's skull. But Hymir sees what is happening. The giant sees the floods rising. He sees Midgard drowning. He sees the end of everything. And in that moment, fear overtakes him. The giant reaches for his sword with a trembling hand, and swings it at the chain. The blade cuts through. The fishing line snaps. Jörmungandr plunges back into the abyss with a scream that echoes across all 9 worlds. The chain falls useless into the boat. The serpent is gone. Thor's hammer falls, striking only empty air and water. Thor stands in the rocking boat, breathing hard, his hammer still raised. Hymir cannot look him in the eye. The serpent sinks deeper and deeper until the abyss closes over it. Thor examines Mjolnir by the fading light. There, on the hammer's face, a mark where venom from Jörmungandr's teeth grazed it. A wound on an invincible weapon. Proof that the serpent was real. Proof that it survived. The giant rows them back to shore in silence. Neither speaks. They both know what has happened. Jörmungandr carries a new hatred now. It carries the memory of the hook. It carries the memory of the god who tried to kill it. Thor returns to Asgard. The wound on Mjolnir never fades. It remains as a scar, a reminder, a prophecy written in metal. Odin examines it and speaks quietly. He tells Thor that the fishing line was cut for a reason. Fate moves as it wills. At Ragnarök, when the end comes, Jörmungandr will break free from the ocean one final time. It will spray venom across sky and earth, and Thor will face it again. They will slay each other. Both will fall. The god and the serpent are bound together by destiny itself. They cannot both live. They cannot both die. Only at the end of all things will the debt be paid.